enjoy having my studio open now and then. Most of the time I like to work without being interrupted, but open studios allow a chance to be really sort of in the middle of my own work with other people here with me. It's different than putting things up in an exhibit, where it becomes more formal. This is sort of my art home.
When it comes to the studio and someone coming into your studio, there's two things. There's a studio visit, which usually involves like one or two people coming in. It involves a type of intimate conversation. Maybe a critique is involved. And then there's, just like an open, wide studio visit. I like both, but the open wide I really, really like because you can set things up and then you can get a kind of raw response from the public. And usually an artist is kind of concerned about if he's doing something right or doing something wrong, or he could be a little, confused about something. Having the public come in will set you straight. They'll definitely tell you if they don't verbally tell you, their physical reaction will tell you what's kind of going on. And that's always good information, even if you want to take it or not take it. So that's one, I think, benefits from an open wide studio visit, is to kind of to take the temperature from the public on what they think about your work.
It's the one chance that an artist gets to see the response to their work firsthand, and I think it's really special to see work in the environment where it's created. It takes the mystery out of it in a way, as well as it also brings it full circle. It's the place where it's hammered out, where it's created with love, and all the images lend themselves to the other images.
Well, my thoughts on the open studios, I think it's a great project for the local art community. I think one thing about St. Louis is I think a lot of St. Louisans don't look to St. Louis artists when they're collecting or purchasing art, and this helps showcase the talent that's here that they might not see in the galleries, because there's very few of the galleries that show local artists. So I think it's a great opportunity for the whole community to see the artists at work and see what St. Louis artists are producing.
I like showing my work, and I like talking about it. A lot of artists don't, or many artists don't, I guess. I like to talk about particularly my abstract work or non-representational work, because I'm a classicist also when it comes to doing abstract work. I never start by just throwing paint on a canvas. I do not paint that way. I normally do narratives before I paint. I do a lot of reading, and I work in series, and I normally write a narrative about the painting that I want to accomplish, and then I do sketches, and then I put a rough idea on the canvas and I start painting. Now that doesn't mean I can't change it as I'm going along, but for the most part I have a plan, and I paint that way.
I'm a quilter. I don't consider my quilts art, but my husband does, and so he encourages me to do new patterns. My personal preference is to work with color as opposed to the pattern of the quilt. But the pattern of the design along with the fabric can make a very stunning quilt. A friend of mine, her brother calls her a blanket maker. I don't know that I'd say I'd make blankets, maybe throws.
The process I've been using recently is I've gotten away from using a model a little bit, partly because it's hard to find a model, but also because I'm finding that I know the human body, I know how to draw it, and I know how to paint it, and I want to take something else and put it in with that. And rather than just, I want to put more of myself into it, as much of a feeling that I have about the images as I can. And that's not something you can structure and plan. You have to sort of let it happen. You have to remove yourself really from the work as you're doing it, and the whole room as you're working, and let what's in your unconscious come out.
To capture a game, you just don't draw a still image of soccer, because that's not soccer. Soccer's not a still image. Soccer is a whole event that involves a stadium, that involves fans, that involves a ref, that involves players. So a type of approaching on that level is what I call like live drawing. It's when the subject is originating, existing, occurring, being in the moment. So that was kind of the beginning of my drawing installations, and that kind of went over to cinema, kind of recording these sections in documentaries or films that I enjoyed, and kind of recording that the movement and the feeling that it projects, and then using that feeling to fuel my own artistic practice and the actual activity of drawing.
I started in watercolors, and I've always gone back to that as my favorite media. I've gotten so I incorporate photographs and found objects in a lot of my work. But this one is an example of a combination of painting and printmaking. It was a series I did over the last year called Fish Out of Water. I actually printed with the fish, real fish that I bought up at the fish market on Grand Avenue, and combined both washes and splatter painting and printing with plants.
My work is autobiographic, largely, and I paint places or nuances or times of day or qualities of thought or things in the human dilemma that strike my interest. I paint from photography, I paint from life. I try to experience things before I paint them. I believe there should be a legitimacy to what you do.
If you take a pattern and put different fabrics with it, you can make the pattern look totally different depending on the material. The materials they have come out with these days are so fabulous. Quilting is an old art, but you can make very contemporary looking quilts.
My current method is primarily painting fairly large scale works where I staple my canvas to the walls. I don't know what size the piece is going to end up being. I'll judge that later. Of course, I'll gesso it, and then I use enamels and oil paints. Sometimes the enamel paints first, sometimes the oil paints, so I go back and forth trying to create layers and some feeling of depth. Although my overall style is a flat style, but I try to create a little illusion of depth.
The dancing women that I do are about that. They're about taking, sometimes it's dreams, and interpreting, and putting those, not interpreting them, but representing them on the canvas, and using the human figure, particularly women, and trying to get the feel of that particular moment.
My latest piece is Untitled, Drawing from the Cave, where I draw several scenes from the movie A Clockwork Orange. I draw while the movie's going, and then later on scan it, throw it in the computer, edit it, and try to recreate the scene from the movie. I never really try to draw the whole thing. They're usually just kind of short kind of situations.
I visited Savannah, Georgia a few years ago. I fell in love with it because the landscape was so open and wide and pristine and undeveloped and untouched by human intervention. And it reminded me of Florida, where I grew up. And it reminded me of the Florida that doesn't exist anymore because it's been so overdeveloped without restraint. So I returned several years later to photograph and then eventually to paint this body of work. And the color choice that you see is a hotter palette. It's sexier colors, it's more steamy and hot, I guess more humid, because that's the nature of the region. It's really much warmer than St. Louis.
Right now I'm kind of winding through the Circle Logic series, which I guess the intent on that series was to mirror the geometric abstraction with abstract expressionist Pollock type, wild, loose type expression of art, really more of an act of painting, the action of painting, as opposed to the geometric forms, which is more of a calculated, thought-through process. And I tried to marry the two styles together, and that's really what I tried to achieve with the Circle Logic series.
If you're doing a realist piece, you have a model from which to work, whether it be a sketch or a photograph or some other form. You have an idea as to what you're going to put down on the canvas, and you may change it, but basically you have a model. With abstraction, you have no model. And so, to me, intellectually, it's more challenging to do abstraction than it is to do mimetic work. The way I do it is I normally come up with ideas by reading. I read a lot of scientific books. I'm very interested in science, particularly physics. And I ask questions about unresolved questions in these various areas of physics. And then I do a narrative. I write a short narrative as to what I'm trying to take from some mathematical concept or some issue that's philosophical and translate that into a visual image. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but that's what I attempt to do.